greatest number of people. That is what a constitution must be. And having set the objective of the constitution, you then frame a constitution to achieve that objective.
Because we really do have a race problem. Those divisions are real. We see it in our politics, we see it in our trade union. We see that they take the divisions with them. Look at where people live in this US. You have enclaves in the Bronx and in Richmond Hill and in Brooklyn. They're taking the division with them.
Women are dying in the streets, and we have a government pontificating running around campaigning for women's vote. No women should vote in this election coming up unless there is something done to the legislation as Magistrate Kim is advocating.
That voices like ours that are not in the political trench fighting it out, voices like ours should become stronger. One of the things about the Caribbean is that we have never had one discourse. Bass will know the days of the New World and the Old World and the radical left and so on. What we had was this concourse of ideas, which I think in the early days of independence pushed us in a certain direction. We've got to move back to that point of having these multiple discourses.
Good evening to the viewers out there, all the viewers of Viewpoint and Globespan. I would like to thank Mr. Nohar Singh, Devin and Kumar for the support here and especially the technical setup. And this evening I have with me Dr. Eric Hansen. He is the president of the Economic Transformations Group, Incorporated, with offices in New York and Silicon Valley, and has been heavily involved in working with businesses and government leaders in transforming the way they do business and coming up with innovative solutions as well. He's worked in countries such as Peru, Ethiopia, Suriname, and Egypt, and as of recent, he does have a history of Guyana, but also very recently would have done quite a bit of work in Guyana. And this particular program here is about educating the public out there about, especially from an empirical basis, what is actually happening within our economy and what are some of the conclusions that can be derived. So, Dr. Hansen, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Doerga. Great to be here with you, Vishnu.
Great. And this evening, our goal is to really make sure that we can bring some light to the discussion. I know that you have gone to an extent of doing quite a lot of interviews and quite a lot of research about what is happening in our economy, and more so when it comes to what will be a new and developing economy that will be somewhat based on the revenues from oil and gas. I would like you to get us started by maybe giving an overview of the study, and I know that you have some information to share with us as well. So this evening I will ask our viewers out there, to pay keen attention to the information that is presented, and to send in any questions as well that we will do our best to answer.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's a great opportunity to be here with you all tonight. I really am very fond of Guyana. I've been involved with Guyana since about 2005, and great opportunity to be here with you all tonight. So it's a great pleasure to have this opportunity for this hour to discuss questions about Guyana's future and to really explore what are some possibilities here. There's a massive change process taking place in Guyana, as you all know. And the question is, how can we best position ourselves to take advantage of this and do it in a good way that's going to create opportunities for us today and for our grandchildren and our grandchildren's grandchildren while we make our way into the future. it's a huge change process that's confronting Guyana right now. One of the miracles of life is really happening because of this discovery of oil resources offshore, and the tremendous good that can happen from that is really up to us. How we decide to move forward, how we work together to make some of these opportunities happen, and so that's what I'm really excited about talking with you guys tonight.
And listening to you as well, I can come to the conclusion that the find of oil by itself will not automatically mean that Guyana is going to transform into this beautiful paradise. It seems like there is some work that we'll have to do in order to realize the potential that is now before us.
Absolutely. The name of my company is called the Economic Transformations Group, and it's called the Economic Competitiveness Group, and they changed it to Transformations because what is really required to have true development is a transformation in the way that we think, in the way that we operate together, in the way that we create a shared economy, much more so than just thinking everybody for themselves. And that's the kind of transformation that Guyana will have to go through in order to be able to really turn these resources into some opportunities that are going to benefit everybody.
And from your bio, I can also see that you've worked in some very resource-rich countries. What are some of the things that they have done particularly well to take care of, to utilize their natural resources?
Yeah, I think that it is a mixed bag. It's a mixed story. It's not easy to deal with the political, economic, social challenges of all of a sudden having all these resources available. I think that in some cases, like I'll just take an example that I really like is Costa Rica. Costa Rica has evolved in their way of running their government and running their economy in a way that has benefited a lot more people, and it has been able to grow much more rapidly than the rest of Central America. They've stayed very oriented towards making benefits happen for the majority of people as opposed to just a few. The politics has been very democratic in how they've oriented, and they've stayed to their knitting in terms of making some infrastructure investments and making some policy frameworks and some business climate improvements such that it's attracted foreign investment, it's kept talent in the country. And as you know, that's the number one thing that Guyana has, and that is a tremendous talented people. And so the question is how do we retain them? How do we educate our young people? And how do we support that process? And how do we even invite the diaspora to come back and get more engaged? They've learned a lot out there in different parts of the world. And so there's tremendous assets that Guyana can mobilize in order to be able to rise to the challenge here. But it's not easy, and there are many countries of the world that have been smitten by the so-called Dutch disease of the resource glut, kind of creating an imbalanced economy. And it, we've seen it with Trinidad and Tobago to some degree. We've seen it in Nigeria. We've seen it in other oil-rich countries, that it can fall prey to just letting the one sector dominate. So Guyana is now in an early stage and has the opportunity to continue to diversify its economy and mobilize the the resources to be able to take advantage of this.
Right, and I know that for the past year, you would have done research, particularly in this area, to kind of figure out where are we currently and where do the opportunities lie in the future. But I think even more importantly, what do we need to do in order to prepare? So I would really like to give you the opportunity to share some of this research with us and help us understand what you have discovered.
Fantastic. Well, I think that I can share my screen here with the audience, so everybody can see that well. The whole idea here is, how do we create local opportunities in the context of oil and gas development? And so we had been doing some work with the Georgetown Chamber, with the Inter-American Development Bank, with other institutions in Guyana to be able to take a look at what is going on here and what can we do to position SMEs in particular in various different value chains to grow and benefit from this. So I'll take a few minutes here to begin by talking about what I've discovered about the oil and gas boom and the extent to which it really is a serious and amazing opportunity for Guyana in terms of how much resources for Guyana.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we'll come back to talking about some of the issues of what are some specific approaches that we can apply here to support local SMEs. Okay, so you've seen all of you have seen many images and heard many stories about the kind of investment that's taking place 120 miles offshore there, and the incredible ability for ExxonMobil and now other players to be able to make amazingly accurate discoveries, and to I think that some 14 out of 15 or 16 attempts to drill have been successful, which is an unprecedented capability. So the seismic technology that's being used by Exxon and other players out in the waters has led to some incredible discoveries. Just as we look at the first 3 discoveries here, the Liza 1, Liza 2, and Ayara, we're seeing incredible amounts of oil that's being discovered there, and that we know that we've got the variety of different stages of development, with exploration now leading to the initial exploitation of the Liza 1, with the FPSO already having arrived there. And then we know that there's a lot of other players that are also doing their own discovery, Tullow in particular, but also Repsol and others have been playing in the field. So first, the Starbrook block, an incredible 14 discoveries there, yielding more than 6 billion barrels of oil equivalent in that area, with most recent discoveries of Triple Tail, and then Tullow has had 2 discoveries in the Orinduk block, just to the southwest of the Starbrook block. So the finds are continuing to come here, and it's very likely that even more will come. So it's an extraordinary time as we look at the entire Guyana shelf. We're seeing this development take place here with Exxon and Tullow just below it right now, but there's also, I don't know the details yet, but I understand that there are a couple of finds in Suriname as well that are coming on stream. So
I'm gonna ask that you're a bit more descriptive, whilst Devin is sorting out getting the PowerPoint up in a more full screen method. So in the meantime, if you can be a bit more descriptive. So now you're speaking about the exploration that is happening on the Suriname side as well.
You bet, you bet. So yeah, I didn't realize that you all weren't able to see the same image that I've been looking at here. So as we look at the entire shelf, almost stretching from Trinidad on past French Guyana, there are many companies that are positioning to be able to get the leases to be able to do more exploration and exploitation in the entire region. So, my understanding, having talked with a number of different actors in the region, is that because of the kind of first in advantage that Guyana has, and Georgetown in particular, that a number of companies, major oil companies and oil service providing companies, are looking at having Georgetown be the base of operations for operating in a much larger context here. And obviously the opportunity of building a deep water port in the Guyana region will cement that first player advantage. So a lot of I saw something that I haven't confirmed, but I understood that what airlines is it? Emirates Airlines? No, which one? There's some airlines that is talking about having direct flights into Georgetown now from Europe, which is kind of amazing. But anyway, these kinds of trends are what we're going to see more and more of, in my estimation. So it's a major play here, and I'm going to a next slide here where we really talk about in what area will these oil and gas opportunities generate into opportunities for local Guyanese companies.
Yeah,
so
and I think that Devin was able to share that across the screen. So Devin, if you can just expand that across the entire screen so people are able to view this and they'll be able to hear us in the background.
Excellent. So the first kind of wave of investments that's happening because of these oil and gas discoveries are the investments by the oil and gas companies themselves. So, for example, as we saw in a previous slide, just to develop the first three developments of Liza 1, Liza 2, and Payara, we're talking about a significant amount of investment going directly into all the exploration activities, all the development, all the port development activities, all the airplane and helicopter delivery systems, all the training, all the placement of materials inside the ocean. So that's the first one. And the second one comes from generating government revenues, from the oil revenues that will be spent on a variety of different projects by the government of Guyana on investment. And third will be all the spin-off activities that will grow because of the growth of related industries. So those are the three main sources of investment here. So as we look at investment just by the oil and gas companies themselves to begin with, we're talking about $500 million per well is being invested to find the oil. And then the development costs after you find the oil and you start laying all these amazing recovery and resource equipment down in the bottom of the ocean floor. It's an enormous undertaking. So Liza 1 is 4.4 billion in investment. Liza 2 is 7.6. So if we total up, it's an initial estimate, but of the first discoveries alone, just the oil and gas expenditure is going to be close to $50 billion. And this is for 6 discoveries. And then, of course, we've got the decommissioning costs that are involved after that. So all of this suggests that this is as if we're doing a lunar landing in terms of the size, scope, and sophistication of the investments that are taking place. Now, this means that there's a huge investment, and the next question really is, okay, and what can Guyana benefit by all of that? And as you can see here in this next slide, for exploration, for development, for execution, and for the decommissioning, most of the activities are as sophisticated as a lunar landing. So
yeah, it's also very important that people understand this particular value chain. And, you know, there are some comments coming on about liking the topic, and you know, this education is important. We are in a season where people might be interested in, you know, what's happening politically, but we also need to educate ourselves about the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's so important. I mean, we're dealing with a very, very sophisticated industry here. I'm using the word to liken it to a lunar landing. We're talking about very, very sophisticated, major, massive companies that have got some of the best scientists and engineers and mobilizing resources of, you know, IT and all kinds of things, so that our ability as a Guyanese company, and I'm going to use the word "our" because I'm feeling associated in some ways, the ability to do business with these major companies here is very, very challenging. They require super sophisticated inputs. And so our ability, a local Guyanese company's ability to get into these oil and gas value chain, to be a supplier to that, is very, very challenging. And so we're looking much further down the line at where we can support these oil and gas companies in their development. So again, we've got the FPSO vessels with SPM. We've got these so-called umbilical risers that go and connect to the actual places where the oil fields are, where these trees and tools are being run by Technip, a major French company. And of course, we've got our drilling activities. And so really, one of the only Guyanese operations that has become a first-tier supplier to the oil and gas world is the shore base. So GISB has the Guyana Shore Base Incorporated has been one that has been able to enter in the first tier, and this is phenomenal. I mean, I just have to applaud the business leaders who made this company and were able to establish it as a player with these more sophisticated companies. So here's a kind of a mapping of ExxonMobil being the key driver here with Hess and Nixon. But
I'm going to ask Devin to just make sure that this is shared on the screen, on the main screen.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, we're shifting now to a kind of a mapping of who are the different players within this oil and gas value chain. Is that on the screen now?
Don't see it on the screen as yet.
Okay, well, what I'll just describe it here a little bit. We have concentric circles where ExxonMobil is right in the middle. So they're the ones that are running the show here and spending the most money, making the investments, and they're hiring these initial first-tier players to provide services so that they can extract the oil, right? So Schlumberger, Technip, SBM, Noble, Saipem, all of these are the major players in the first tier. And then they, in turn, are hiring other companies to do various different services. Schlumberger, for example, was hiring a company to help it build its so-called mud plant. They actually produce a lot of the oil and lubricants that go into the oil drilling process. So right there close to the shore base, there's a company that helped to design their plant there. And so there are, second-tier suppliers that are involved in doing this. And this is where we see Total Tech starting to come in as oil field services. Again, another kind of a joint venture. Guyanese firm. Tiger Tanks Guyana is one. Munishwars is another. Anyway, there's a number of different Guyanese players that are getting more involved at that level there. John Fernandez, you can see here on the outside if that's running. Brain Street, one of the IT firms, major IT firms in Guyana, are part of these inner circles, if you will, of local suppliers to the oil and gas chain, right?
Right.
So that's the more sophisticated level here. As we move on, and I hope you can see the screen here, because we're talking now about how we move from the direct impact of those kinds of spending chains into the more indirect ones, which has much more to do with the areas of opportunity for local Guyanese companies.
Right, and Devin, if you can please have this on screen and leave it on the screen, please.
So the idea here is that spending by ExxonMobil trickles down through the first tier and the second tier and the third tier suppliers that they contract. And ultimately it comes down to companies that would be providing services for each and every one of those players. So we know that they have to land at the airport and they have to take taxi cabs. We know that they're shipping in some various different things, either by plane or by water. And so there's the handling, the logistics of all of that. There's the warehousing, there's the trucking. All of those provide opportunities for our local Guyanese companies to provide those services, and so therefore to be benefiting from and taking advantage of those investment opportunities that are being created. So all of that is what's going on with a direct and indirect impact. And then there's what I want to call a third impact, which is kind of an induced one, where we start to add things like tourism, food production, infrastructure investments, buying things locally from retail and wholesale. The whole real estate industry is benefiting from the impact of all these spending by oil and gas. Yeah. So this is where we have some increasing opportunities for Guyana companies to position themselves to benefit and grow from all of that. There's no question that because of the influx of foreign experts from these companies, that we're already experiencing the impact that that's having on real estate values. We know that they're starting to fill up some of the schools in town with their children. We know that they're looking for places to go for weekend tourism and for other kinds of tourism. So all of those impacts are starting to be felt, right? It's a little bit slow because so much of the spending and so much of the activity is happening offshore, but it is happening, it's beginning to be felt, and it will grow, as you could see from the initial estimates on the amount of additional exploration and exploitation that's going to be taking place. Okay.
Right, so this particular graphic really outlines, the direct impact by the oil and gas operators themselves, then indirectly through the different layers, and especially where Guyanese companies can get into doing those supplies, and then further the induced impact. And I suppose some of that induced impact will also come from the way any government will decide to invest those revenues as well. And there was a question online earlier from Richard Rambaran, thanking us for having the discussion, but he also was asking if you believe that the Hartwick's rule should be used to guide development planning and spending. And the Hartwick rule, from my recollection in economics, is that we replace the or we put in resources, and these would be man-made or planned resources, to replace the amount of non-renewables. So as we extract, that we also generate new capital and new resources. Do you have a view on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've got to say that I have to agree with Richard, and thank you for that question. As you know, we're really faced with the real challenges of global climate change, despite what some of the naysayers are saying, including my president. And what we've been learning over the years is that the last 150 years of human development on the planet has been super extractive and has not given any mind to whether it's the forests or the carbon resources that we're pulling out of the Earth's mantle, or many of the other kinds of resources that we're making use of here. Obviously, we've got huge impacts just from the burning of the coal and the oil and the other energy resources that we've sucked out of the planet. And that's creating the global climate change challenge that we have. So if I understand Richard's question well, it's that we have a responsibility to deal with the carbon balance on our planet. If we're going to be taking resources, we need to not only diversify our economy so that we're not just completely dependent on that one sector, but that we're in fact regenerating to mitigate the impacts that are involved here. Now,
so let's take a quick commercial break, and then we'll continue the presentation and the discussion.
Great.
L'Amour is helping to sponsor Globespan 24x7 programs. L'Amour will be celebrating Diwali on board the Princess Luxury Yacht with a cruise on October 19th at 6:30 p.m. Take a cruise down the Hudson with non-stop Diwali celebrations, plus DJ and fashion show. Tickets start from $75. That's a Diwali cruise on board the Princess Yacht on October 19th at 6:30 p.m. Call Angeli at 845-545-9936 or Shika at 646-732-0065.
Right, thank you very much. And I think one of the things that might also be on the minds of economists like Richard is, the various deficits that we face in this country, starting from our significant infrastructure deficit when it comes to roadways and ports and airlift. We also have education and health. So to some extent, as we start depleting or further deplete our natural resources, we just in tandem as well have to make sure that we fill these deficits, these gaps that we currently have, so that in the absence of the resources that we're now consuming, we now have better infrastructure, a better workforce, and more opportunities to build on in the absence of these. So I'd like you to maybe touch on that and then continue with the presentation.
Sure. I think that there's a tremendous responsibility that governments and business leaders and other people are increasingly understanding about the degree to which we are living in a place where we have to take care of our local economies, our regional economies, and our global economies. So there's got to be a much broader consciousness about what role and responsibility that we have. At the risk of opening into a whole set of conversations about the Sovereign Wealth Fund, I think that that's got to be a really important question for all Guyanans to become much more conversant and aware about. That we're going, and I'll get in a minute into the whole question of how much resources, how much financial resources is the government of Guyana going to be obtaining from oil revenues, and then how will it be spending those? And so this is where we really have to think about that circular economy more and more, and the degree to which the benefits of that oil spending really can go a long way in increasing the opportunities for, one, helping Guyanese people gain more opportunities by having better infrastructure, better education, better hospitals, better services of all kinds, but also diversify the economy so that there are opportunities. And I think that in most all cases, as you'll see in the examples that I put forward, we're looking at what are the sustainable industries and how do we create those.
So I'd like to invite you to take us through. We're now about 37 minutes into the program, so we would have about 20 minutes to get into really, what should people be looking at and where could possible opportunities lie.
Okay. Let me move through this here. One of the first things that we can be looking at is the degree to which there are a lot of different kinds of opportunities for many Guyanese businesses to get involved in supporting these so-called non-core services of oil and gas. So food and catering, entertainment, housing, office equipment, professional services, all of that are part of the value chains where we see opportunities just right within the oil and gas area. I think the second, Richard actually shared a number of really excellent work that he'd been doing at identifying what areas does Guyana actually have players, small business companies that can provide some of these goods and services. So these are all areas where Guyanese companies can play in that. Now, I just want to mention that there is already one organization, many of you know them, the Center for Local Business Development, actually does support SMEs to get more deeply involved in this entire area here. And our question is how, so here's one example. The Center for Local Business Development is helping a number of companies to get ISO certification, which is hugely important in terms of getting up to speed with the kinds of things that are required. Now, what we're seeing here is that there's very few of them that will be able to supply directly to the oil and gas. So what we do need is to provide support for other sectors as well. Okay, moving on to the area of government revenues. That is really our second area of opportunity that we want to look at, and it's actually one that has got much more widespread opportunities for Guyanese companies, because the amount of investment that's going to be coming through oil and gas is going to require very sophisticated inputs, whereas from government revenue spending, there'll be a much wider set of things. So I want to say that this is the prime source of opportunities is actually coming from oil and gas revenues. And they are going to be massive. So, for example, just the first discovery, Liza 1, is expected to generate almost $8 billion in government revenues over the next 16 years. So we're estimating that at a minimum, an additional $100 to $500 million could be allocated to infrastructure projects. So this is the Liza 1 right here. Just that. About. When we add in Liza 2, Payara, Chinook, Turbo, Pacora, the total amount of government revenue that can be spent towards projects, you can just see here that it's a massive amount of resources. And I just think that we need to understand that this is a significant amount of spending that's going to take place, in particular on infrastructure projects like the building of roads, ports, airports, bridges. All kinds of expenditure will be made in building infrastructure projects. They can be hospitals, they can be schools, they can be all kinds of investments. And so one of the prime areas that will be able to position itself to grow is what I'm calling the sustainable construction industry value chain. So that's everything from the various materials to all the cement industry, the metalworks, the furniture, all of the metal hardware that's required, all the contractors, the packaging material, the transport services, all of those variety of things are going to be hugely important to benefit from the government revenue spending. The sustainable local food value chain as well is going to be, the restaurants, the hotels, the grocery stores, the markets, and all the producers of the crops and the livestock. All of that is going to be a tremendous area for opportunity and growth over the next few years. Talk about the sustainable tourism value chain. For all the different kinds of tourism, ranging from ecotourism to business tourism to cultural tourism, all of those opportunities are going to be, again, massive opportunities for Guyana as it grows in the next few years. All the businesses will be needing business services. So they'll need IT services, they'll need management services, they'll need distribution supply chain services. Buildings will be built, housing will be built, training services. So if you are involved in one of these kinds of businesses, you want to get up to speed and as aware as possible about these opportunities that are coming downstream and prepare yourself for that. And that's where we really want to take a look at what can be done. I want to put up this slide as well too, which really suggests that there are some exciting technological advances that are coming in what we're calling the blue economy. All the things related to the coastal services, to things related to the oil and gas, to offshore energy production, to harvesting the sea in new, exciting ways. There's incredible seaweed production projects going on up in Belize right now, for example. And all the aquaculture and fishing opportunities are quite extraordinary in what can be done here. So those are all the opportunity areas. And now I just want to take a few minutes as we get close to the end of our time to be talking about what can be done. And we talked earlier about the different kinds of certification assistance. That's got to be right up at the top. Strategic alliances with other international firms. We know that there's a lot of international players coming in from nearby Trinidad and Tobago, for example, who are experienced with a lot of things in this industry. So how to develop strategic alliances with them, with other players that would be coming in. Obviously, diaspora makes good sense for being able to do that. And what has been very important, I think, is to talk about what kinds of other programs that can be developed. So there's accelerator programs, there's incubator programs that I think represent some exciting opportunities. So I don't want to go too much into the details about that right now, but maybe we could just talk about what are these SMEs, what are the opportunities that we can really get going in the next 6 months and the next 6 years. It's going to be a long-term development opportunity process.
And the value chains that you have on the screen now are, exactly the types of somewhat, the value chains that we have currently in place, but they will need to step up to their relevant standards. As we know that when we talk about tourism or agriculture or technology, there are the various standards that these particular industries have to meet up to in order to be able to benefit from a global market. So I would say, taking a look at the businesses that we currently have in Guyana, they need to get very focused on what is the standard that they need to perform to. Investing as well is another thing that companies need to look at. It will take a significant amount of funding to get companies ready. Where have you seen companies access this type of funding in other countries where there was an influx of resources?
Well, in lots of places, it begins by having some of the donor organizations, as they're involved for a while, the donor organizations can tend to go away as the incomes start to rise. But I think that's still very much an important starting place for Guyana to be figuring out how they can leverage more and more of that. But there are also, as I mentioned earlier, the opportunities for strategic alliance and strategic investments from foreign investors and from diaspora investors. I think that's going to be really critical. Obviously, there's a lot that needs to be done to transform Guyana's finance industry. I think we'll see some, restructuring continue to take place in the banking industry that will also provide funding for companies, and I think companies will become more and more amenable to how to make more investments in these different industries as they understand the risks involved and the opportunities involved in these areas. It seems like organizations like IPED, although they represent a relatively small amount of the financing, are strategic investors. And so the degree to which any Guyanese business company can put together business plans that make sense, there should be increasing opportunities for getting financing.
Now, in Guyana as well, what you're telling me and what my research also points out is that not only do we need to become technically more sound in our companies, the management of our companies also needs to step up significantly, because the types of funding that we'll now be pursuing might not just be debt financing via the local bank. We might also have to look at equity financing, especially if we want companies to come in with their intellectual property and their experience to allow us to grow faster. Sometimes it seems as if in Guyana, everything gets stuck with our politics, and we're not going to touch that tonight. There are many other shows that discuss the politics in Guyana. But what would you advise to? Let me ask you two sets of advice. What would you advise to the businesses now, especially the SMEs? Maybe your top 3 pieces of advice to them that they need to take in order to be in a better position in the years to come? And I'm going to ask you that the top three for the business and the top three from a citizen's perspective.
Great. Excellent question. So I think that for me, the first question that any business has to be looking at here is how can I understand who my buyers are better and better? There's going to be a changing landscape within the buyers, but in any case, that's for any business, that's going to be the first place. Where is my market? Who are my buyers? And to get really, really clear about that and to get as knowledgeable as possible. So in some cases, your buyers are consumers themselves. And in many other cases, your buyers are other companies that are buying what it is that you're selling, whether it be food or services. You need to know what your buyers are, who your buyers are, and how their demands are changing and growing. So I'd say that's really critical. And
if I just stick there for a second,
sure.
For a very long time, given where our economy has been, many of our companies had to be generalists, trying to sell almost anything to anyone.
Yeah.
What would you advise when it comes to that type of behavior? Should we start looking at specialization, or do we remain with the attitude of trying to sell anything to anyone?
Well, I think our economy, the Guyanese economy, is going to be getting more and more sophisticated. That is to say, it's going to be you're going to have to be more and more careful about who your consumers are and what the targets you are. It still makes sense to as opportunities arise to be able to respond to that. But I think more and more focus is going to be needed here. So what example? I don't know if you're still seeing the screen here, but I've got this.
Yes, I am.
One example here of a cable manufacturing company. Their marketplace is going to be Government of Guyana infrastructure projects. So the implication for this cable company is they have to know who the decision makers are, what kind of projects are coming down the pike, and they've got to stay focused on that. Now, as they might have some other opportunities coming in, say, for example, from oil and gas or from other construction companies and so on, there may be some good reason to go ahead and keep in touch with those, but this is their primary market, and to be able to understand that and chase after that, they need to do that. Similarly, if we're talking about a tourism industry, who are the main clients that will be coming to their resort hotels, wherever they happen to be, or to their restaurant chains? All of that is really important. Now, the second piece that I want to say, in addition to the market, is really how do I increase my amount of specialized knowledge? So every one of these examples here has got to be able to move up their ability to have trained people and to understand what are those needs that we have to move up the next level. So it's training, and then the third one is really the certification aspects. In order to be able to professionalize our company, we've got to make sure that we're using up-to-date standards. So with the specialized training, we come back to what you had mentioned earlier, Vishnu, which is that of the management. The management has got to be doing specialized courses and trainings, and I know many of the things that you actually provide. So that would be the three critical areas that each company has to do.
And just before you jump into the citizens, on your last visit to Guyana, you actually move around the city on a bicycle. And this would be you as a visiting as a visitor to our country, making the investment in a bicycle in Guyana. And this is you as a human being as well, making a certain decision. And this is the type of advice as well that I'm asking you as well. What do our citizens need to start looking at?
Right. Thank you for that. And indeed, it's a total pleasure for me to be riding a bicycle around in Georgetown. Mm-hmm. It's so much of what we as individuals do is that's where the ultimate choices are being made. And we know we started the conversation by saying that Guyana is ripe for transformation. So that means that the individuals, we all need to be doing our transformations, our own bits. We need to get smart about what is going on. And I think that there's, we're avoiding the political conversation, and in part, it's for good reason, because that can be very distracting. There's a number of things that we as individuals can do that will really help to prepare us to take smart action, and action that's going to be of benefit to more and more people. So again, we're talking sustainability as a key driving feature here. And what can I do to really understand how I can, just as a citizen of Guyana, can contribute to the conversation and to the dialogue and to the direction that we need to go. I think that there's many things that each of us individually can do to upgrade our own knowledge and understanding about what's happening, to really see that there is a possibility to transform our country. And that does have a lot to do with where are we going to be getting our new leadership from? How are we as individual citizens going to be involved in the dialogue and the conversation and the action that's required to create a Guyana that's going to be of value for our grandchildren and the world? I mean, there's a role that Guyana, with its beautiful forests and its incredible resources and its amazing cultures and cuisine and so on, it's just got so much to offer the world. So how do we start to, as citizens, to spin up our own thinking and our own belief systems about what can be possible? I think there's a lot of focus on the negative sometimes, and I want to argue that this is a time of great opportunity and hope for Guyana to transform itself. It's going to require some real conscious efforts, and it's going to require some miracles in lots of ways too, because it's not an easy process, and it's going to require some hard work. So all of those would be things that I would strongly encourage Guyanese citizens to start cycling up towards what positive future do they really want to create for their grandchildren.
But then what really stands out to me is the level of education that citizens themselves will have to put themselves through in order to then utilize that newfound knowledge to make better decisions. Because life, the outcome of life is how fast and how good your decisions are. How fast do you make them, and how good are they? If we sit on the fence not making many decisions, and if we do make them and they're not very good, we can't really get that far. I think, when it comes to leadership, and we are heading into a period of time where we as Guyanese citizens will have to choose our leaders, I think the best thing we could do is educate ourselves on the leaders that we currently have, so that we can make decisions on who we want to lead us going into this very, very interesting period of time. The next, based on the graph that you indicated there, which is just limited to, I think it was back a few months ago, limited to those discoveries. I don't think it took into consideration yet the latest discoveries and that possible development. But it's going to be a very exciting time, and I do want to thank you for taking the time out to share your research with us. I do hope that many people who've been viewing this have a better understanding now of what is to come. Do you have any parting word for us before we close?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed being on this show, and I also enjoy being a part of this this Guyana adventure. It's a very exciting thing. Few places on the planet get to have an opportunity such as the one that you all have. This is extraordinary. And I really want to be a part of supporting you to move in good directions. So I really, I'm very excited for you, excited for this amazing opportunity, and I'm looking forward to participating with you. So thanks for having me. It's really been a pleasure, Vishnu.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to having your support as well. And to the viewers out there, thank you very much for tuning in this evening. To the folks at Globespan, Mr. Nohar Singh, Devin, thank you very much for your support, on the technical side, and also to make sure that the message gets out there. This is Vishnu Doerga, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.